I suppose it's a speculative point, but we evolved for specific types of conditions, the ones that exist on Earth. Even things like the moon and Mars that are, spitting distance away in galactic scales are very inhospitable for biological humans. I think in the far future, if we want anything like what we are to continue to exist and go out into the broader universe, the things that go out there that carry the humanness into that other realm are going to have to be machines, because machines don't need to breathe or eat or drink water. They can survive in stasis for millions of years as long as nothing is moving. So the idea of building a robot that has a software system that can that encodes in some sense the things that we value about being a human. You load it into a machine, you fire it off, and a million years later, it could come online at some other star. A human body or any biological entity can't do that. So the idea of where this all ends up in the long arc of history seems to require, if we want to get off this planet, or something gets off this planet that's like us, a deep understanding of how our minds work. One of the things that I think is reflective of my view of all of this is that there's kind of a series of steps we need to take as a civilization that are more about understanding things than anything. And in order to build any of the futures that we can think of, we first have to understand how our minds work. And that understanding process is the key step. So once we understand how it works, there are all sorts of options that are open to us about what we do with that understanding. The understanding is the first part. So if we can understand how our minds work, then potentially we could build software systems that encode the sorts of things that we value or believe are necessary, or some way we think is important. And then we can build software systems that are basic, like embodiments of those features or the things that we value. But the first step is understanding.
That's a great summary of my life and the book. Thanks, Jordy. It's like, it's like, when I was young, a little off topic here, I made the list of the top, when I was a teenager, I made a list of the top questions one could ask, the biggest questions. And first one is, why does the universe exist? The second one, why does it behave the way it does? The third one is, what is life and how did it get here? And the fourth one is, what is intelligence? And I stopped there because actually the intelligence part was really required for answering all the other three. So we might as well start thinking about how the brain works, and because that's probably the best way of answering the first three questions. And I think that's somewhat what you're saying. It's like, we have to understand how the brain works if we want to imagine any future that's different than pure biology would get us.
Yeah, I think this notion that everything starts and ends within our minds is a difficult concept to wrap your head around, so to speak. That all of the things that we think about begin and end in a system that we don't understand. So understanding this is this general purpose technology of human experience is clearly the most important thing there is. So this is such an obvious argument, I think, once you kind of wrap your head around the fact that quantum field theory and general relativity and spaceships and computers, they all begin and end within the human mind. Yeah. So if you can understand that thing, you've unlocked a type of understanding that's of a different character. Understanding how the mind works is different than understanding how to build a spaceship.
I would differ in one thing, Jordy. I think we actually we don't know how the brain works, but we made a lot of progress understanding how the brain works. And that's why I wrote this book. I think what we've accomplished is actually a real watershed event. I think it's a sort of real turning point. I try to make that point in the book, and how it's the first time we have a real framework for understanding what intelligence is in the brain. So I'm just going to state that, whether you believe it or not, I feel that way. And so now these things become very present questions, because with what we know now, I'm confident in this century we will build very intelligent machines, and we need to start thinking about what the consequences of that are, and what the benefits and the risks and the opportunities.
Hear, hear. I certainly hope you're right.
I'm pretty confident, but we'll see.
All right. Now, Jordy, in addition to doing the work you do on building intelligence in machines, you are also an avid fan of WWE. And so my question here for you is, when you're watching competitive wrestling, what are the attributes of the best ever matchups? When you are pitting one against the other, what are the attributes where when you see a fight, say, okay, this is going to be great because of X?
Man, this is a curveball. The thing that is most engaging about combative sports is having somebody be emotionally invested in the outcome. You know, the things that draw the most fans to any kind of competitive event is when they really care who wins. And generally, that's when you have a clash of worldviews. So you have a heel versus a baby face, or a villain versus a good guy, or the more prosaic thing that one of the people who's competing. So I'm not exactly sure where this is headed. So maybe.
All right. Well, listen.
Respond, but
no, Jordy, what I'm going to suggest to you here is put on a seatbelt for what you're about to see. Malika, bring up the slide. All right. So let me begin here with Jillian. Jillian, I've seen you posting on Slack, reflecting. You have read so many different definitions of intelligence and thought about them from a wide range of perspectives, in particular in your setting of thinking about intelligence, machine intelligence, and law. Just in our reading group, we have wrestled with about a half a dozen definitions. What's your thinking at the moment in terms of definition of intelligence?
So I think I had posted that this is Jeff's is my new favorite definition of intelligence. My prior favorite definition was Nielsen's, which said that intelligence is the capacity to act with foresight and appropriately in the world. And because I think human intelligence is fundamentally about that appropriately part, which is normative. What's the right action? What's the appropriate action? What's the good action, which we constitute in our societies through our norms, our regulatory structures, eventually law. And so I wasn't a fan of the pure computational view of intelligence, because I think it's missing that. And the reason that Jeff's definition has now become my new favorite one is that ability to learn a model of the world and the reference frame sort of gives a way of thinking about how that normative process develops, how it is implemented. And I think that's the fundamental piece of what we need to be figuring out. So, Jeff at the end of the book gets to, will partly depend on governance. And I think we kind of wave our hands at governance. And I think that's actually the only reason humans have succeeded as we have, is because we keep inventing new ways of managing that challenge. So anyway, this is definitely my new favorite, learning a model of the world.
Rich, why don't you weigh in?
There's a difference, and it's okay, because definitions are just definitions. They aren't good or bad or right or wrong. They're different. It's fine to define things different ways.
Rich, you'd make a terrible WWE wrestler.
That's true. But now let's say I think, goals and value. Jeff is defining it as valueless. I'm surprised that Jillian went along with that, since she cares about normative things. And this definition of the ability to model the world without any goals, without any saying what's better or what's worse. I'm surprised, Jillian, that you like that now.
But let me say why. And that's because I think we have this hand wavy notion about values, that they're just kind of floating out there. And in fact, they are the most critical models that we build. And that's what we keep building, and they're flexible and they change and we make predictions, and they exist. Our values exist out in those relationships between us. And so they are in the capacity for that model, as opposed to that they're just fixed things are out in the world. Some biology gives us some goals, obviously, you know, to eat, reproduce, but values are social constructs, and they're that critical model. That's why I'm a fan of this. And I probably just stop there. I don't continue with the rest. It's the model itself is valueless. No, that's actually what's out there. That's one of the most critical models that we are, and the fact that there's thousands and thousands of them. That's the other thing I love, Jeff, is the thousands and thousands of them, and they are predictive, and we learn and we adapt and we go to the next one. That values are not something that's given to us by the environment. We are constructing that through our intelligence.
What I think is interesting about these two quotes is you know, the idea that the you know, intelligence or our brain is there to solve problems and reach goals is clearly at some level correct. But I wanted to understand how it did that. And that definition of intelligence on its own is insufficient. It missed the point. And so to me, the point is, once you have a model, you can then say how to achieve goals. It's the structure of the model that allows us to achieve goals. And so when people try to build intelligent machines, if we focus on goals and achieving goals, we end up building machines that play chess and play Go and solve different problems, but we're not actually answering the question, what is the more universal property underneath that which explains how we do all these things? And that to me is where the idea that we learn this model of the world, and the model allows us to say, answer questions like, how would I achieve a goal, or how would I do this? And so to my mind, and I've been, you know, like many people, I've been basically in this field for 40 years. This understanding about the model, as you said, the essence of what's going on underneath, is something that just isn't well understood. Some people get it, but especially in the field of AI, I'm not going to play blank. I think many people don't understand the importance of that. And so I think once you understand that, you can then go, oh, well, now I know how to solve a goal. You know, how do I know how to achieve a problem, answer a problem, something like that. And so when we think about building intelligent machines, a large part of the book was not about how we define the goals, but what is the structure that we would create to allow a machine to create goals and achieve them. And that's where I talked about the common sense knowledge, how knowledge is represented in the brain. You know, there's no value in understanding how a coffee cup works really, but there's value in knowing how to manipulate one to achieve goals.